Good morning. Welcome back. Okay. Today we start with the non-interactive MPC. The first talk is Black Box Reusable NISC with Random Oracles by Yuval Shai, Dakshita Kurana, Amit Sahai, and Akshaya Srinivasan. And this paper is presented by Paul Liu. So it's up to you.
Okay. All right. Hi, guys. As you can tell, I'm not an author on this paper. I'm a proxy presenter for this paper. None of the authors are here this morning, so here I am. Okay, and I encourage any detailed questions to be sent to the authors by email or on the chat. So let me start this talk by recalling the setting of secure two-party computation. And in secure two-party computation, we have two parties P1 and P2, each with private inputs x1 and x2. And they also have description of a common function f. And P1 would like to learn the output f of x1, x2. And in the literature, we call P2 the sender and P1 the receiver. And after engaging in multiple rounds of communication, we need the following three properties to hold. One is correctness, that P1 learns f of x1 and x2 at the end of the protocol. Then is receiver security, P2 learns no information about the private input of P1. And sender security says that P1 learns no information about the private input x2 apart from what can be inferred from f of x1 and x2. And we would like these two security notions to hold against malicious adversaries, and the security notion is in the real ideal world paradigm. And a central goal in the work of secure two-party computation is to get efficient secure two-party computation, so we would like to minimize the round complexity. And towards this goal, two works of Shai et al. Introduced this notion of non-interactive secure computation. And again, this is the two-party setting, and in non-interactive secure computation, we have P1 generating a first-round message, message 1, P2 sending a second-round message, message 2, and P1 learns f of x1, x2. And this is, in fact, round optimal. You can't get security guarantees from just one round. And it should be noted that if we only care about semi-honest adversaries, Yao's protocol already satisfies the required security properties. And additionally, if we replace semi-honest OT with a malicious secure OT protocol, then the same protocol already satisfies security against malicious receivers. So the main challenge here is to protect against a malicious sender without compromising on the receiver security. Great. So they show the following theorem. The following theorem says that for every function f, there exists a non-interactive secure computation protocol for securely computing f in the OT hybrid model. And this has statistical security if f is log depth, and this is due to some theorem about randomizing codings. And we also have computational security for general f assuming black box access to a PRG. Great. Okay. So non-interactive secure computation has lots of exciting applications, but it also has severe limitations for several important use cases. And let me motivate one of these important use cases. So consider a patient who needs a kidney transplant. And to find a suitable transplant donor, we would like to do some sort of DNA sequence matching. So this patient has some DNA sequence that's its private input. And to find a suitable donor, we can't just reveal their DNA sequence in the public, so we're going to use a non-interactive secure computation protocol to facilitate this. So they're going to publish message 1 from a non-interactive secure computation protocol, and here comes some potential donor. And the donor has their own DNA sequence, which is their private input, and they send a second round message, message 2. And the function we're computing is match or no match for the sake of kidney transplants. And let's say it's no match. What happens? Well, we need to find a new donor, and unfortunately, the standard notion of non-interactive secure computation, we would have to publish a new first-round message. And in fact, we'd have to do this for every potential donor that came along. And this is incredibly inefficient, and what we would like is this first round message to be reusable. So here comes the definition of reusable, non-interactive, secure computation. And the works of Ishai et al. And Chase et al. Consider this problem. So in this setting, we have some receiver P1 with private input x1. The receiver has function f in mind, and the receiver generates an encoding of its private input. And just think of it as publishing it on a public bulletin board. And now the first sender comes with some private input x21, and this sender sends a single second round message, message 21. And P1 can learn f of x1, x21. Then comes another sender, the same thing repeats, and with the same message, first round message, message 1, and P1 can now learn f of x1, x22, just from receiving the second round message, message 22. And this will repeat for, let's say, n parties. And the receiver learns the outputs of the function f applied on its fixed input in each of these sender inputs. And in this setting, the works of Ishai et al. Can actually be modified so that it can be secure with n reuses where n is actually a priori bounded, meaning that you actually have to know n beforehand. Okay. And just note that you can actually get this if you just run n copies in parallel, but this would incur a multiplicative overhead. And the works of Ishai et al. Actually show how to do this by getting only an additive overhead. So that's the difference there. And this is unfortunately a severe restriction because bounding n severely limits the functionality, and of course the size of the messages depends on this a priori n. So we'd like to remove this restriction, and now we consider the unbounded reusable NISC setting, where n is a priori unbounded. And unfortunately, the work of Chase et al. Show this negative result, this impossibility result, which says that there exists a log depth circuit such that there exists no statistically secure unbounded reusable NISC protocol for computing f in the OT hybrid model. And in the OT hybrid model, as a reminder, here you have some ideal functionality for OT, and both parties have Oracle access to this OT. They also show the following positive result, and the following positive result says that for every function of log depth, there exists a statistically secure, unbounded, reusable NISC protocol for computing f in the OLE hybrid model. So by strengthening what cryptographic primitive you're considering, namely oblivious linear evaluators, which is you can think of as an arithmetic analog of OT, so OT is over a binary field. You can think of OLE over some super-polynomial or exponentially sized field. So by by strengthening your cryptographic primitive that you're considering, you can actually get a positive result. Of course, there's some limitations with this positive result. So first of all, OLE is much more expensive to implement than OT. And the flavor of OT that OLE that we need is some reusable notion of OLE, and this is only known from the DCR assumption, decisional composite residuosity. And lastly, this protocol for computing general circuits, this positive result by Chase et al., requires non-black box use of PRG. And whenever you have this non-black box use, you incur a computational overhead because you actually have to know a specific implementation of the circuit. Okay, so the goal of this paper is to construct unbounded reusable NISC protocols for computing general circuits such that they can be efficiently instantiable from a wide variety of standard cryptographic assumptions beyond just DCR. And it has to make black box use of the underlying cryptographic primitives to remove this computational overhead. And the results of this paper, Ishai, Kurana, Sahai, Srinivasan, 23, is that for every function f, there exists an unbounded reusable NISC protocol for computing f in the random oracle model that makes black box use of a 2-round malicious secure OT protocol. And we just note that the previous work last year by the same authors show how to construct a malicious secure OT protocol in the random oracle model from black box access to a 2-round semi-honest secure OT protocol. So as a corollary, we can actually relax this requirement of malicious secure OT protocol to semi-honest secure OT protocol. And you might be wondering at this point, is this a contradiction to the negative results of Chase et al.? Then Chase et al. Proved this was impossible. And in fact, they did not. Chase it out only rules out constructions in the OT hybrid model against unbounded senders. So that's with statistical security as well as in a different model. Okay. And critically here, we are going to be using black box use of a 2-round OT, and this results in us settling for computational security. Okay. And this 2-round OT protocol is actually more efficient than a 2-round OLE protocol as well. And this black box use of 2-round OT is actually crucial for the construction to go through. Also, this is in the random oracle model. Okay. So Finally, they also give constructions of reusable NIC for general circuits that make black box use of cryptography. And just as a reminder, the positive result from Chase et al. Uses non-black box use of PRGs. And an interesting open question is to extend this to the LE hybrid model without random oracles. Okay. So here's some more results beyond just reusable NISC. So here we consider the problem of two-sided NISC. Here you have two parties, P1, P2. And unlike the previous setting, in this setting, both P1 and P2 would like to learn f of x1, x2. Okay, and so P1 and P2 will engage in a first round message exchange. So message 1, 1 and message 1, 2, they don't depend on each other. And then we have a second round of messages exchanged, and after P1 and, after these 2 rounds of messaging, P1 and P2 each learn f of x1, x2. And just note that if you took a one-sided NISC and you tried to run in both directions, it does not result in two-sided NISC. And why is that? The two directions could actually result in, the parties could actually use different inputs. So it could be that in the first round, maybe P1 learns f of x1, x2, but in the second round, P2 learns f of x1 prime, x2 prime. So one-sided NISC does not imply two-sided NISC, generally speaking. And the theorem from last year's work by the same authors show that for every function f, there exists two-rounded NISC protocol for securely computing f that makes black box use of a 2-round malicious secure OT. Okay. And today I'm going to be telling you about a more simplistic model of two-sided NISC, but the authors also consider a more general definition that captures both this simplistic two-sided model as well as the one-sided model. And I encourage you to see their formulation in the paper. So what is reusable two-sided NISC? Well, here the first round message is reusable. But here the setting is a little different. The syntax will be where we're going to be switching the function that we're considering. So for example, consider P1, P2 having a common input, the description of some function f1. Then in this reusable setting, P1 and P2 can now generate the first round message, and for this particular common input f1, they can generate second round messages that depend on f1. So the length of these messages will also depend on f1. And at the end of this exchange of messaging, P1 and P2 will each learn f1 of x1 and x2. And this can continue for many different functions, many different executions, and let's say up to some n. And of course, what we would like is n to be a priori unbounded. And the results in this paper show the following theorem. There exists an unbounded two-sided reusable NISC protocol for computing general functions in the random oracle model that make black box use of a 2-round malicious secure OT protocol and additively homomorphic commitments. And let me just make a note quickly on the additively homomorphic commitments. In fact, if the party is allowed to maintain an updatable state across every execution, then actually we can remove this need for this additional assumption of additively homomorphic commitments. And just as a quick note, again, if we can actually relax this to black box use of a 2-round semi-honest secure OT protocol, again by leveraging last year's result. Let me give you some quick intuition on how to overcome the impossibility result from Chase et al. So what is the intuition behind the impossibility result? Well, it says that suppose party 1 sends a first round message of all these 2 out of 1 OTs on these bits B1 through BK. And what is B1 through BK? You can think of them as some encoding of P1's private input. So think of secret sharing, secret shares. So B1 through BK need to be hidden, and they're fixed across all executions. So this will be in the OT hybrid model. And here comes along malicious P2. And what will malicious P2 do? Malicious P2 will effectively recover all these bits. And how will it do it? It will make use of the fact of that it can effectively implement a abort oracle on P1. So what will P2 do? P2 will make a guess for the first bit B1. It's going to try to recover bits bit by bit. And say the real bit is B1 star. What is it going to do? It's going to make a guess for B1 and say this bit is B1 star. We don't know actually what B1 is. And what you're going to do is you're going to generate the message M1 minus B1 star as bot. And for the other message, you're going to generate honestly. And what you're going to do is you're going to send these two messages over. And in the case that P1's bit was actually B1 star, then it's going to see a real message and everything is fine. But in the case that it actually picked 1 minus B1 star, meaning that you guessed incorrectly, it's going to abort. And P2 will see that P1 aborted, and P2 will then claim that it knows B1. So either way, you recovered the bit B1. And the fact that this first round message is reusable and fixed allows P2 to actually iteratively recover all the bits B1 through BK one by one. And this is an issue. So to prevent this attack, somehow we have to ensure that all the sender OT messages encode valid inputs, not bot. And so how would we accomplish this? By making black box use of a 2-round OT. And I would like to clarify that we can't do this for all OT sender messages, but we can ensure that at least a large fraction of the messages are secure. And this turns out to be sufficient for our purposes. So the sender first generates a second round OT message, K executions of this. And after this, the sender chooses a random subset S of the OT executions and sends this set to the sender. And the sender opens each of these OT messages corresponding to the set S. And you can think of, by opening, what do we mean? We mean that the sender reveals the input and randomness used in generating these second round messages. Great. And now the receiver checks if all these messages encoded and all these open executions are valid. And this will ensure that more than 90% of the executions are valid with overwhelming probability. And good. Okay, and note that such a check is impossible to make in the OT hybrid model because you don't actually have access to these second round messages. You just have Oracle access to this ideal functionality. And this is actually the key distinction that allows us to recover the previous impossibility result. And unfortunately, this approach seems to increase the number of rounds, and we're also no longer in the 2-message setting. Right. Okay, so how do we collapse the number of rounds? Well, we're going to use a Fiat-Shamir heuristic. So we're going to compute the subset S as the output of a hash function applied on second round sender messages. And now the receiver now checks if the set S is computed correctly, and then performs the same checks as before. And if the hash function is correlation intractable, this ensures that more than 90% of the executions are computed correctly. And there's actually still a subtle issue. In fact, this doesn't prevent P2 from cheating in a small number of executions, because you could learn 10% of the bits here, 10% of the bits there. And the reusable setting, P2 could potentially cheat in a small number of executions in each reuse, and could use this information to break receiver security. So to overcome this, to overcome P2 from cheating in a small number of executions, the authors will use some sort of standard error correcting properties of Shamir secret sharing. And just as a conclusion, the authors gave new constructions of reusable NISC and reusable two-sided NIC protocols. They're instantiable from almost all known standard assumptions in cryptography, CDH, LWE, so forth. And the open problems here are to remove random oracles from the construction, remove the need for additively homomorphic commitments from the two-sided protocol, and improve the concrete efficiency. And thank you for the attention, and I direct most of the questions to the authors. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next talk is Maliciously Secure MrNISC in the Plain Model by Rex Fernando, Ayush Jian, Eilan Komardowski, and Rex is giving the talk.
Thanks for the introduction. So in this talk, we're going to be focusing on a primitive called MrNISC, and this primitive generalizes two-round MPC, and I'll be talking about how to achieve malicious security for this primitive in the plain model. And this is joint work with Ayush Jain and Eilan Komardowski. So let's start by quickly reviewing the goal of MPC. So let's say that there is a set of parties, and these parties have some private input, and these parties don't want to share their private input with anyone else, but the parties also want to answer some question about the joint set of inputs. So what MPC does is allows these parties to communicate, to learn the output to this question, or more generally, the output of the evaluation of any efficient function over their inputs, while still respecting the privacy of each individual party. So in this talk, we're going to be focusing on two important areas of study in the MPC literature. So the first area of study concerns the security model. So early MPC results focused on proving security in what's called the standalone setting. And in this setting, it's assumed that all the parties are completely isolated from the outside world where they're participating in this protocol. But of course, this isn't very realistic because in real life, there's nothing stopping these parties from talking to other people while the protocol is going on. So it's an important goal in MPC to prove security for protocols in this more realistic concurrent setting. So another important goal in the MPC literature is studying the number of rounds of interaction that's required for security. So in other rounds, let's say we assume we have a simultaneous broadcast channel. The question is, how many back and forth messages do we need in order to get security? So in this talk, we'll focus on these two goals with respect to protocols that work in the plain model. So that is, they don't have any trusted setup phase and they don't have a random oracle. So in this setting, a long sequence of works has eventually shown that it's possible to achieve security in 4 rounds. And on the other hand, it's also been shown that this is the best we can hope for, that 3 rounds is impossible. And unfortunately, it's also been shown that concurrent security in any number of rounds is impossible in the plain model. So in order to get around these impossibility results, we're going to use a relaxation of security that's called Super-Polynomial Simulation, or SPS. And the idea is that, so in normal MPC, we allow the simulator to have like an arbitrary polynomial blowup in the running time compared to its real-world adversary counterpart. So in SPS, we're going to relax this. So we're going to allow the simulator to have a slightly super-polynomial blowup. So in terms of SPS, several works have shown that this relaxed definition can be used to get around both impossibility results from before. So first of all, it's possible to get concurrent security in the plain model. And also it's possible to achieve protocols that work in 3 rounds. So the round barrier is also, you can get around the round barrier as well. So the goal of our work is to explore the space at the bottom of the slide. And as a first step towards this, I can tell you that we achieve a 2-round concurrent secure MPC protocol in the plain model. So now the only thing that's left is 1 round. So is 1 round even possible? So it turns out that the answer is no, and there's actually a very simple argument that can be used to show this, and I'll explain this to you now. So let's say these three parties, Alice, Bob, and Eve, want to evaluate some function f. And let's say that they have a one-round protocol to do this. So just by this protocol being one round, I can show you that it's insecure now. So let's say Eve is malicious, so she can do the following attack. So she can come up with any arbitrary x3 prime, and she can find the evaluation of f with respect to x3 prime and with respect to Alice and Bob's private inputs, just in her head, just by replaying the protocol in her head. And she can actually do this an arbitrary amount of times, and so she can learn an arbitrary number of evaluations. So this is called the residual function attack. And of course, this leakage about Alice and Bob's input is like way more than what a secure protocol would allow for. So this means that this protocol is insecure. Okay, so non-interactive MPC is impossible, but let's say we're stubborn and we don't want to accept this. So I can tell you a way to get some of the properties of non-interactive MPC without running into this problem. And the idea is as follows. So this system is going to work with respect to what we're going to call a public bulletin board that everyone can see at all times. And as a first step, all the parties are going to publish non-interactive commitments, special non-interactive commitments to their inputs. So once this phase is done, let's say the parties want to evaluate f again, so they can do this using a single additional round of interaction. And so in addition, this system is going to allow reuse. So if the parties want to evaluate f prime now, they can again do this in one round. So by this, as the number of evaluations goes up, the round cost per evaluation approaches 1. So finally, the system is going to allow for parties to join at any time simply by publishing non-interactive commitments to their inputs. And as soon as they've done this, they can participate in any subsequent function evaluation phases. And additionally, these function evaluation phases can take place with respect to a subset of parties. And the parties that aren't participating, they don't have to communicate at all for these phases to work. Okay, so this primitive that I just described is called multi-party reusable non-interactive secure computation, or MrNISC. And it strictly generalizes two-round MPC. And it was first proposed by Ben Hamuda and Lin in 2020. But in terms of plain model protocols, they were only able to achieve semi-malicious security, which is a weaker version of security where the adversary is assumed to follow the protocol specification honestly, and no guarantees are made if this assumption doesn't hold. Okay, so with that in mind, I can tell you about our main result. So we achieved the first construction of MrNISC that's maliciously secure in the plain model. And we do this using sub-exponential variants of the following assumptions. So first we assume I/O, second we assume DDH, and third we assume the existence of a time lock puzzle. So in the course of achieving this main result, we also achieve two intermediate results that we also think are independently interesting. First, we define and construct a new strong variant of two-round zero knowledge. And second, we also construct a new one-round non-malleable commitment. And notably, this commitment doesn't require keyless hash functions. So in the interest of time for the rest of the talk, I'm going to focus on explaining this new zero knowledge. So I'll explain the new definition and why we need it. So to motivate this new definition, first let's quickly talk about the high-level approach that we're going to use in order to get malicious security. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a semi-malicious secure MrNISC, such as the one of Ben Hamuda and Lin, and we're going to upgrade security using zero knowledge. So this is a very common approach. And the idea is that we can use zero knowledge to enforce honest behavior that's required for semi-malicious security. Okay, so for this part of the talk, I'm just going to sort of ignore the reusability aspect of MrNISC. I'm just going to treat it as a two-round protocol. Okay, so what are our constraints in this setting? So first, there's the round constraint, so we only have 2 rounds. And second, we also know that in this setting, in the plane model, the best we can hope for in terms of zero knowledge is 2 rounds as well. And this is because non-interactive zero knowledge is impossible without setup. So what does this mean for us? This means we can't check the validity of the proofs until after the protocol is finished. So let's think about how this plays out. So let's say there's an adversary that corrupts some of the parties and causes, let's say that this adversary causes the first round to be dishonest in terms of the semi-malicious protocol. So what this means is that now the honest parties actually have to send out their round 2 semi-malicious messages before finding out that this round 1 is dishonest. And in particular, if these honest parties send out these messages in the clear, that means that semi-malicious security actually guarantees nothing in this case. So to get around this problem, what we would like is some sort of way to send out an encrypted version of round 2 in a way that it's only decryptable if the first round is honestly generated. So this sounds like a perfect job for witness encryption. So if you're not familiar with witness encryption, the idea is it's an encryption scheme that allows you to encrypt arbitrary messages. So in our case, we're going to encrypt round 2. And instead of having a public key, the encryption is given with respect to a statement in NP. And the idea is that if you have a witness for the statement, you can decrypt. And on the other hand, if the statement is false, so in our case, if round 1 is dishonest, then standard ciphertext indistinguishability holds. So the messages don't reveal anything, or the encryptions don't reveal anything about the plain texts. So notice that this solves our problem already, or it seems to at least, because now in the dishonest case, if round 1 is dishonest, then the adversary learns nothing about round 2. But let's think about what happens in the honest case now. So how can the parties decrypt now? Well, so what does the witness look like? It looks like, it has the secret input and randomness of each party. And of course, it's obvious that these parties can't reveal these secret inputs and randomnesses publicly, which means that no one party has this entire witness, which means no party can decrypt. So this seems like a problem. So what could we use to fix this? Well, if we had some sort of privacy-preserving witness that each party could publish, and then this witness for the statement is a concatenation of these privacy-preserving witnesses, and let's say that these witnesses reveal nothing about the underlying secret witnesses, then that would be good, right? Well, this should sound very familiar because what is zero knowledge? It's exactly that, right? It's a way to publish a privacy-preserving proof that convinces a verifier of the validity of the statement, but doesn't reveal the underlying witness. So let's try to use this. So now we can set the witness that we want to use to be, zero knowledge, second round zero knowledge messages from each party attesting to their honest behavior during round 1. And we can change the statement that the witness encryption is going to use in order to reflect that. So now the statement is that there exist second round zero knowledge messages which prove the validity of this inner statement that round 1 is honestly generated. And now the idea is, or the hope at least, is by soundness of the zero knowledge protocol, this should reduce to the original statement, right? But now we run into another problem because it seems like now we need the zero knowledge protocol to satisfy statistical soundness. Because like with computational soundness, it could be totally possible that the inner statement is false, that round 1 is dishonest, but there could exist second round zero knowledge messages that prove this false statement, even if they're hard to find. And unfortunately, witness encryption doesn't guarantee anything about, in terms of hiding messages that are encrypted with statements that are not false, even if the witnesses for those statements are hard to find. So it turns out that achieving a 2-round zero knowledge protocol that satisfies statistical soundness is impossible except for like very limited subcases. And so the point of our new zero knowledge notion is to provide a sufficient approximation of statistical soundness in order to be able to be used with witness encryption, but to still be achievable. And so the notion is going to work as follows. So first, we're going to work in the simultaneous message model. So the first round is going to have a message simultaneously from the verifier and the prover. And then this new zero knowledge protocol is going to work in one of two modes. So the first mode we're going to call perfect soundness mode, and the second we're going to call statistical zero knowledge mode. And moreover, the mode is going to be determined completely by the round one transcript. So once round one is fixed, that also fixes the mode. And perfect soundness mode is what it sounds like. So if we fixed a round one transcript that fixes perfect soundness mode, then for any X that's not in the language, there shouldn't exist any second round accepting zero knowledge messages. And on the other hand, statistical zero knowledge mode says that there should exist a simulator such that in this mode, this simulator should be able to generate second round messages such that the transcript is statistically indistinguishable from a real world interaction. And we're going to require that the perfect soundness mode happens with some tunable negligible probability mu. And this is going it'll happen with this probability assuming the prover and the verifier are computationally bounded when they generate their first round messages. And we're also going to require that a computational prover cannot tell what mode the protocol is in. Okay, so let's think about how we use this new zero knowledge definition in order to solve the problem from before. So let's imagine that we're using the same setup, but we're now using our new zero knowledge. And let's say that there's an adversary that corrupts the first round, but can somehow learn something about the encrypted second round that it shouldn't. So it learned something non-trivial about this second round plain text. So the first observation that we can make is that whatever this adversary learns, it should still be able to learn this information in perfect soundness mode, given that the zero knowledge protocol is in this mode. And this is because the two modes are indistinguishable. But notice that now that we're in this mode, now that we're conditioning on being in this mode, this statement that we used to generate the witness encryption is now false, right? Because the inner statement is false, round one is dishonest, and so since we're in this mode, there don't exist second round ZK messages that prove false statements. So then if the witness encryption itself is strong enough, or in other words, if the advantage in distinguishing ciphertexts is guaranteed to be sufficiently less than the probability mu of the perfect soundness mode holding, then we have a contradiction. And thus we've successfully shown that that using this new zero knowledge, the witness encryption hides the second round in the case that the first round is dishonest. Okay, so that's our new definition of zero knowledge and how we use it. And so we're able to construct this new definition using the following assumptions. And like I just explained, this is one of the main technical tools that we use in constructing our MrNISC protocol. So I'll just quickly touch on some other challenges that I won't have time to get into, but which I thought were interesting. So first, when constructing MrNISC, we had to deal with extraction. We have to, the simulator has to extract the corrupted party's inputs. And so to do this, we needed one round non-malleable commitments, which we constructed in the paper. Second, we had to make everything reusable in order to satisfy the MrNISC definition. And this was particularly challenging in the context of the zero knowledge protocol. It was hard to make that protocol reusable. And finally, when we were constructing the complexity hierarchy to make all the proofs fit together, you know, it was challenging to come up with a hierarchy that made the hybrids go through, and we ended up using multiple axes of hardness to do this. And I'll refer you to the paper for details on this. Okay, so I'll just restate our main results. So we achieved the first malicious secure MrNISC in the plain model. And we also, in the course of doing this, we achieved 2 other intermediate results, which we think are independently interesting. So that concludes my talk. Thanks.
Thank you. We have time for a quick question. Okay. What is the assumption underlying the time lock puzzle? What is the assumption underlying the time lock puzzle?
You can use the RSW assumption.
Oh, okay.
You can also build it from I/O and slow functions. I think those are the 2 main ways to build time lock puzzles.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, the speaker again. Okay, the last talk is Minimizing Setup in Broadcast Optimal 2-Round MPC by Ivan Damgard, Diva Ravi, Luisa Siniscalfi, and Sofia Yokobonov. And Sofia is giving the talk. Sorry, Luisa is giving the talk.
Hi. So this is a joint work with Ivan, Divi, and Sofia, and I am going to present it. So let's start with some definition about MPC. Well, we have our set of parties that they want to compute a common function. Now they are exchanging messages, and in the end they will get an output. And now the security of MPC guarantees me that nothing except the output is leaked to the party as long as the function allows so. So now an important question is to understand actually what happened in the case that the adversary refused to continue the computation at a point and just decided to abort. What are the properties that MPC can guarantee in this case? Well, the first notion that we can consider is the one of guaranteed output delivery, which says it doesn't matter what the adversary does, the honest party are going to retrieve the output. Then we can consider a slightly weaker notion, which is the one of fairness, which says if the adversary is going to does not get the output, also the honest party don't, but if the adversary is getting the output, also the honest party do. So, and then we can consider an incomparable notion, which is the one of identifiable abort, which says, well, the adversary is, if the adversary aborts, is allowed to recover the output, but at this point, all the parties unanimously abort and identify who caused this computation to abort. And then we can consider another notion, which is the one of unanimous abort, which has the same guarantee of identifiable abort, but in this case, there is no identifiability property. Namely, if the computation aborts, well, all the parties are unanimously abort, and the adversary is still allowed to recover the output. Finally, we can get the weaker definition, which is the one of selective abort, which says, well, if the adversary abort, is allowed to recover the output, and some honest party may abort, and some other parties instead may retrieve the output. So if you can see this set of notions, you can see that when we want to require identifiability, we are also asking for unanimity. But what about all these cases where actually we cannot get identifiability and unanimity at the same time? In our work, we are asking, can we still get some form of identifiability which is still meaningful? In particular, what we design is a new notion of security, which is called selective identifiable abort. In this new notion, if the adversary aborts, well, some party may recover the output, some party may abort, but the party that abort the computation are actually also identifying who aborted the computation. And let me stress here that honest parties never accuse other honest parties of aborting. Okay? That's the set of notion of guarantees that we can consider in MPC. And now I am starting to go more in details of our work. Well, we focus on two-round MPC, which is the optimal round complexity, and we are asking what is the optimal broadcast complexity, namely which guarantees are possible of the one that we saw when we start to limiting the number of broadcast rounds, namely if broadcast is available only in the first round or in the second round or none of the round. So there were previous work on this setting, but the work of Cohen et al. Was the first to give a completely characterization in the two-round MPC setting where we consider a dishonest majority. Then the work of Damgard et al. Answered the same question, but for the case of an honest majority. So the work of Damgard et al. Does rely on a public key infrastructure. So this leaves open the question if what is the landscape, where instead the multi-party computation protocol just rely on a common reference string. And that's what actually we answer in our work. So this is a big table with a lot also of previous results and relations about that. The main takeaway of this table is that one of our results actually shows that if you want to have identifiable abort and you don't want to have you want to rely on broadcast just in the second round, well, you need to have a super honest majority, and an honest majority is not enough. Okay? So we give a lower bound and the matching upper bound for this setting, among the other results. Let me stress other two things in this table. Well, the first is that some of these results do not hold. Some of the impossibility do not hold for the corner case when we have just one corruption. And I defer to the paper for this case where the landscape changed a bit. Another important observation here is that all the positive results that we have actually do not assume private peer-to-peer channel in the first round, which means that the first round doesn't assume an encrypted peer-to-peer round. Okay? So as an additional result of our work, we study what's feasible and what not in the context of selective identifiable abort. And we give a completely characterization for the two-round setting, both in the dishonest majority and in the honest majority, relying both on CRS and PKI. Okay? And let me stress here that actually, in this specific setting that I highlighted, the best guarantee possible is selective identifiable abort, meaning we cannot do better. So in this setting, we actually guarantee some form of identifiability, which before was not possible, since identifiable abort is impossible in those settings. Okay? So that's the general overview of our result. Now, for the rest of the talk, I will just focus on one positive result. Namely, the one where there is a peer-to-peer in the first round, broadcast in the second round. I am using as a setup only CRS, and I am relying on the fact that there is a super honest majority of users. So the high-level idea is that we follow the same approach of Cohen et al. And Damgard et al., but new challenges are going to arise since due to the fact that we don't use a PKI. So let me also stress that here we are not making use of a private channel in the first round. Okay. So what is the general blueprint? I am saying I have a protocol that is broadcast, and achieves identifiable abort. And now I want to make a compiler which also allows me to run it when the first round is peer-to-peer. So the first question can be why I cannot just run this protocol when the first round is peer-to-peer. Well, because the adversary can actually send different, in the first round, can send different messages to different honest party. And then he will obtain different version of the second round message. So, and this is an attack that is not considered in the original protocol, because in the broadcast round, in the original protocol, the first round is over broadcast. So everybody has the same view of the first round. So now we would like a mechanism such that actually the second round is released only if everybody has the same, only if in the end of the first round, everybody has the same view of the round one of the parties. So let's say that I have for simplicity and abstracting away some detail, let's say that I have a magic box, which is gonna split out the second round message of a party, given the first round messages of all the other parties. Let's also say that, still for simplicity, that these rounds are just 1 bit. So in particular, we want to evaluate this box, choosing the correct bit of the bear. So if this first round message of the bear is 1, well, we would like that everybody has the green token. And if the first bit of the bear is 0, we would like that in the end of the first, on the second round, to evaluate this box, everybody has the blue token. So on top of this box, we would like to have another mechanism such that we could distribute these tokens, and in the end of the second round, everybody agrees on the same version of the token that they need to use, based on the first round messages of all the other parties. Okay? So this mechanism was, a form of this mechanism was already implemented by Damgard et al., but they used public infrastructure to do it. They rely on a PKI. Instead, we come up with a different version of this tool called one or nothing secret sharing with intermediaries, in which we don't make use of any PKI. So, and in the last part of this talk, I am just gonna focus on this specific mechanism, okay? So, here is our setting. We have these 2 tokens, and we want to communicate this to the other parties, based on the bit of the bear. So, one thing that the sender can do is just secret share this token. Let's say the blue token for simplicity. We are just gonna focus on 1 token. And let's say that I want to communicate this share to a receiver. Okay. One thing that I could do is just to send this share to the receiver. And this seems fine, right? But what about the case that the receiver claims he didn't receive this share? At the same time, the sender can claim that he sent this share and the receiver is lying. And the other party, they don't have any possible way to actually understand who is lying between the two. So here it comes the observation that actually in our case we have a lot of honest parties, right? And we can actually use these parties, called also intermediaries, to actually trace and understand if this conversation happened or not happened. Okay? So now, in order to do that, we are going to share each shares again and send a single sub-share to the intermediaries. And then there are the intermediaries to send this share to the receiver. Now, what happened in this case? Well, in order to not be caught, the sender has to agree at least to n-t intermediaries. Okay? At the same time, the receiver must be in agreement at least with n-t intermediaries. So there should be enough support from at least n-t party, otherwise someone will be caught, okay? And this is exactly the observation that is underlying our tool. So I will give you now a bit more details about that. Let's recall what is our setting. Well, we have this, now let's focus on these two phases. There is a phase between the sender and the intermediaries, and another phase between the intermediaries and the receiver, right? And so these are two different phases, but actually in our setting, in the first round, we are relying only on public channel, and we are only assuming a common reference string. So how we are going to actually send this share privately to the intermediaries? What we are going to do is actually that in the first round, we exchange just public keys between each parties. So each party has a public key with each other parties. And then what we are going to do is to do this transfer, these two-phase transfers, just in one round. So let's see. The sender has the public keys of the intermediaries, right? For which they have a secret keys. And now what she can do, well, is to encrypt each shares using the keys of the intermediaries. Namely, for the first intermediaries, she will encrypt the first share using the public key of the first intermediaries, and so on and so forth. And she will prepare all these boxes, right? And she will broadcast all these boxes in the broadcast round. Okay, but at this point, the boxes are only transferring at the intermediaries, and we are already at the second round. So how actually we are making also the second transfer? Well, here it comes the second observation, right? Because now the intermediaries have also exchanged in the first round a public key with the receiver. So what they can do is to transfer their decryption capability. And how they are going to do that? Well, they are going to encrypt their secret key using the public key of the receiver. And they are broadcast that in the second round. OK? So now the observation here is that if the sender is not going to be caught, well, at least n-t intermediaries will get the correct boxes encrypted with their public key. At the same time, the receiver has is at least in agreement with the n-t intermediaries. So in total, there is an intersection of n-2t party, which are agreeing with both of parties. And since our threshold is just 1/3, well, we show in the paper that actually this is sufficient to get correctness, so the receiver can actually reconstruct the correct subshare. And we are also ensured that a malicious user can at most reconstruct one of these two tokens. Okay, and that's what I wanted to say. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Luisa. Questions? Okay, I have a question. Is the case t equal to 1 very different from the cases you presented?
Yeah, actually it is, because here in the case t equal 1, it makes actually a difference if you have a private channel in the first round or public channel in the first round. So we are showing that actually if you have public channel, it's actually impossible for the corner case of t equal 1 and n equal to 4.
Okay. More questions? Okay, thank you, Luisa, and thank you to all the speakers for the session.